Okay, so now for the panel of discussants. I think we are missing some, or are they all here? All? Ah, Anna doesn't feel well. A lot of excitement. So let's start. I want to paraphrase a sentence that came to my mind. I was thinking about whose life is it anyway while you were giving the talk. Meaning, I would like to share this meeting to 3 parts, as we do. Don't we do always 3 parts? The first part is I want to think of why or what consciousness has to do with psychotherapeutic. I mean, I'm going to bother you with disturbing questions, okay? Do you allow me, Mark? Okay, it is what consciousness has to do with the psychotherapeutic psychoanalytic clinic. How is it connected, and how is it connected to the case presentation we heard yesterday? This is the first part. If you disagree with me, it's okay. And the second part was that I would like the audience to raise their disturbing questions about what happened here today. And the third part is that maybe we'll have some discussion between our lecturers. Okay. Are you feeling confident sitting here?
No,
What? Mark coming from South Africa and staying with us. So it's all right. I said no well. Yeah, this is the reason why, because I think the earth is shaking. And you talk about neuropsychoanalysis. Is it okay to start?
Sure. You want me to answer your first question?
Yes, please. Is it okay to start that way? I will give Mark like about 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
7? 10. Okay.
No, I'm happy to say that 10 minutes is okay.
Good. Okay.
So your first question was, what does consciousness... Your question was, what does consciousness have to do with psychotherapy, and with reference to the case that was presented.
Exactly.
So my answer to that question is... My answer to that question is that one of the slides in my presentation was a quotation from Freud, in which he said that Freud, the discoverer of the unconscious, says that there is one aspect of the mind which it makes no sense to speak of unconsciousness, and that is feeling. So for me, when you say what does consciousness have to do with psychotherapy, it has feeling has a lot to do with psychotherapy. In fact, I am of the view that our patients suffer mainly from feelings. And as you saw in my presentation, I believe that consciousness in its most elementary form, the basic, elemental, fundamental type of consciousness is feeling. And that if we want to understand consciousness, we need to understand feeling. I won't explain why, because that's what my whole talk was about. I think that since Freud's death, we have learned a lot of new things about feeling. And in particular, if I have to single out any one person who has taught us all of this, it is our late dear friend Jaap Axel, who understood feeling in relation to the instinctual brain. What are the basic motivational urges that drive the engine of the mind? And I think it's very important for us to bring this knowledge into psychoanalysis. This is in the best spirit of Freud. Freud was always interested in new facts and was always ready to revise his theories in the light of new facts. So we forget how radically Freud revised his theories during his own life. And I think that the best respect you can pay to Freud is to continue in that same vein, to continue to develop our discipline in the light of new practice. So that's what I think is the place of consciousness in psychotherapy. I think that everything that Freud also, by the way, said that consciousness is the one beacon light in the darkness of depth psychology. It's a wonderful statement. So to link it to the case that was presented last night, my approach as a psychoanalyst, when I start with a new patient, it is always the question, what feeling is this patient suffering? It is a very good starting point because it's the surface of the mind. It's the conscious part of the mind. And it is also what has motivated the patient for the most part to come and see us in the first place. So if we focus on the feelings of the patient, we're focusing on the same thing that the patient is focusing on, the same thing that's motivating the patient to come in the first place. It immediately establishes a common purpose. It's good for the therapeutic alliance, therefore, but also because it gives us a basic orientation to what the problem is. In the sense that I've just said, that feelings are the symptoms of the underlying urges, the underlying needs, the way that we become aware of our needs is through the feeling of it. Therefore, the feelings that our patients suffer from tell us something about which of their needs are not being met. What is it that has gone wrong in their attempts to deal with life and its problems? In other words, how to meet my needs in the world. So it's also a very good first orientation point. Yesterday's case, I listened to it in that same way as this general principle that I've just described, is how I listened to that case. Was what is the main feeling here? And as I said to you yesterday, initially I thought rage, and then I saw separation distress in the form of panic and of despair, and then there was fear, and then there was a deficit of nurture and care, and then there was the problems in the sexual life being used, so lust also. It seemed like all of these feelings, and then I thought, the problem is that one of our needs, which balances all the different feelings, all the other needs with each other, which is play. And play, I don't have time to tell you everything that we've learned about play from the cancer and from neuroscience in general. But that immediately made sense for me of this patient. The difficulty that she had was one of play. It was an inability to, she had difficulty, which is why she didn't have fun in life. Life was very serious for her. And if you can't play, everything is about life and death. If you think about play, it's exactly not the thing itself. So fear, playful fear is not actual terror. Playful rage is not actual attack. Playful sexuality is not actual copulation, and so on. That is not play as soon as it becomes one of the other things. For this patient, there was great difficulty in being able to do this as a thing, which comes with enormous rewards. And this is why you ask any child, what is your favorite thing? They say, play. Why do you like to play so much? Because it's fun. That's the reward. The reward for us doing this is fun. This is what this patient had great difficulty with. Not now, 6 years later, but it seems to me that this is really where the topic started. And then there's the question of reconstructing through the transference, trying to understand why does she have this difficulty. And as I said last night, I think it has to do with the lack of reciprocity. And it's just a guess, but it seems like a fairly obvious guess, that this comes from the great burden of having dead parents. Where the give and take, the to and fro that is the essence of play, the mutuality, that she lacked this capacity, which necessarily leads to a lack of empathy. You can't, the whole point of play is that you can't only take your own point of view. You have to take account of the feelings of your playmate, of the needs of your playmate. Otherwise, they won't play with you anymore. They will say, it's not fair. As this patient affects her. And I felt that she experienced the mind of the other the needs of the other, including of the analyst, the need to understand. She experienced it as a great improvement. So those are my comments to you.
So yeah, it's really I can think about the interaction in the therapy, the way she's asking questions and getting reactions. It is almost impossible to spin, isn't it? And you know,
she needed her point of view to be the thing that, in fact, she didn't understand why anything other than her point of view should be what including in all of her other relationships, which of course is repeated in the context. By the way, that's just a footnote if I may add, that we don't understand the word transference properly. We think it's only what the patient does with the animals. Transference is what the patient does with their objects, with all of their current documents. Transference doesn't only happen.
you're nodding. What you want to say?
Not just my necklace, but no. First of all,
sometimes the sore neck is just a sore neck.
Anyway, I want to say that few things. First of all, yes, I think.
Dale, go to go.
Okay, okay, that's it. Excuse me. I wanted to say that few things. First of all, to resonate what Mark said about understanding the patient is very helpful. I agree with Mark that it reflects the relationship between me and the patient, and feeling that it was very hard for me to feel good. When I reflected about my presentation, the spontaneous things I said, oh my God, I'm such a I feel like I'm nagging, I'm an annoying therapist, and I didn't think about it in advance when I was planning this talk, but it's mainly what I feel in her, because something lacks in, even if it's 6 years of very meaningful therapy, something is lacking in the feeling of we're here together, we have the same goal. I sometimes say one thing, sometimes two things. She sometimes, there is not this feeling that I usually have with my patient, and that's why this therapy is very frustrating, and I feel that this formulation is very helpful. I'm still struggling with how to work with it, as I asked you before, but it makes sense and it's really helpful. And I want to use this opportunity to say that a few people approached me after the presentation, and they asked me, and answered your question as well, does this new way of formulating, of using consciousness and the effects that Pax is talking about, does it help you as a therapist? And first of all, the answer is yes. It's still new to me as an NSPC. I'm still struggling to formulate it by myself. I didn't formulate it as play. The protocol here really surprised me and made sense, and I'm hoping to get to the point that I can do it myself. I'm not there yet. But it is very helpful, not just when he solves it for me, but also when I sit with patients in the past year after the workshop, and we're studying once a month with Mark, have face presentations and learn this approach. And I feel different when I sit with my patients. I feel different with this method when I'm trying to focus what is conscious, what is unconscious, what is the effect. And thinking of the seven instinctual systems helps me be focused to these things. Like with this patient, as I said yesterday, very quickly, the seeking system. This patient was the first patient that I started thinking about the treatment system about her, like traveling and all her plans about traveling. Then after a few meetings that I interpret her need to explore, like I was talking about, it seems like you have this need to explore, but something is blocking you. And I don't think I would get to that formulation without understanding the sequences. Not that I understand it perfectly, but the concept and realizing it's an instinct, it's a need. And so that's my answer to you. And
so if I may just say one more thing, and then we must move on to other topics. So this thing about what to, sorry, I'd like to say two things. One very brief, which is that this is the whole point of bringing in this new instinct theory, is precisely that it enables us to see new things. And so it's not just a new language or a new fad or let's try and be modern and have nice things from the latest neuroscience and so on. I think it's really my attempt to use that knowledge was first and foremost, I said, let us try. So the meetings I'm having with your group once a month, I have been having meetings for years with another group in Cape Town, where we do exactly that. We look at cases, one after another, and we ask the question, do we see something more that we wouldn't have seen, and does it help? Because the final laboratory, in the sense of the final court of appeal for advances in psychoanalysis, is the clinical situation. It's not the neuroscientific laboratory. We can take ideas from there, but then we have to test them in our laboratory, which is the consultant. And it is only through experience that I have learned that we do see something more and something new, and it is helpful. That's the first of the two things I wanted to say. The second thing relates to your question about, well, what must I do? And when I answered you last night, there was great pressure of time, and I couldn't answer it fully. But two people from the conference came to me afterwards. One of them is sitting here, there he is, and they said that was really disappointing. Everything else you said was really interesting, but that last thing, that all we do is the same, it's just interpretation, that's really disappointing. So I spoke to them privately, and I want to say publicly now a little bit more about that. So I told you it's a change in instinct theory, but that has knock-on effects in all sorts of ways, and I've told you that the feeling the patient suffers from shows that there is something that they're doing, we call it prediction. There's something that they're doing which is intended to, which is meant to meet that need, and it's not working. That's why they are suffering from that feeling. The feeling is prediction error. And that's what feeling is, as you know from my talk. And this is what the transference is. The transference is where we look to see what is the patient doing over and over again, banging their head against the brick wall. What are they doing that they unconsciously doing that is intended to meet this need, which is not working? And they don't know that they're doing it because it's unconscious. That's exactly why they don't update it. That's why they do it even though it doesn't work, is they don't link the feeling, the conscious prediction error, the feeling, they don't link it with what they're doing unconsciously. The intentionality of what they're doing in the transference of repetition is not connected to its effects, to the prediction error of the feeling. So that leads to this dreaded thing of interpretation, which I want to explain what I mean by it. For me, transference interpretation is not reconstruction. And I think those of us who think that transference interpretation, the aim of it is to go backwards into the past to explain what happened, or even worse, to remember what happened, because in fact, by definition, you can't remember what is unconscious and you never will. So the idea that the aim of psychoanalytical treatment is to come up with an explanation from the past as to why things are as they are in the present will never change anything. The directionality of transference interpretation is from the past to the present and the future. That the only, and I want to say something extremely stupid, but it needs saying, the only thing that the patient can change is what they're doing now. You cannot change the past. You will never change the past. The only thing you can change is what you're doing now, which has implications for your future. And the resistance that patients have against changing what they're doing now is enormous. You know, the resistance against looking at the transcripts is not a resistance against reading. Patients love to wallow in the past, and we mustn't collude in that. What we need to do is to say the following, and now I'm going to say it very didactically. Remember, I do not teach my patients. I don't speak like this to my patients. Please, I hear it all the time. I told you yesterday, this is why I was so defensive, is I want to say, no, I'm not saying that this is your amygdala to my patient. But this is what I'm saying to you. A transference interpretation entails 4 things. The first thing is not in these words, but you've got to convey to the patient, can you see you're doing this thing over and over again? This is the pattern of what you're doing, number 1. Number 2, can you see this is why you're doing it? Which is, by the way, where the instruction comes in. That you are trying to meet this need by doing this thing. Number 3, can you see it doesn't work? It's not meeting that need, this thing that you do. And then number 4, and that's why you're suffering from this feeling. That's transference interpretation. To give the patient the opportunity to see, because that's the only thing that they can see. They can't see the unconscious non-declarative cause, never. But they can see its effects. That's in the transference, and it's happening now. That you can show. So the focus is on the present relationship now, what you're doing with me, what you're doing with all of your objects, this thing that you're doing, can you see what you're doing? Can you see why you're doing it? Can you see it's stupid? It's a childish thing, it doesn't work. It's irrational, and that's why you're suffering from it. And that is the patient realizing affectively, really in the here and now moment, that this makes sense of their suffering. And then the last thing I have to say is, what happens next is the patient does it again. And again and again and again. And so you've got to point it out again and again and again, because non-declarative memory systems work very slowly. It's hard to learn and hard to forget. So we call that working through. That is my technique. So this patient has to know what she's doing, why she's doing it, that it's not working, that this is why she's having these troubles, so that she then can do it differently. First with you, and then again, and then again, and then again. And this is how we change.
Shall we go to the second part? Here, if it includes your questions. The second part is the question to whoever is left. Yona, you wanted to ask something?
My name is Yona Rosenfeld. I'm so I want to say, in the hurricane last year, I decided that I'm going to bring in my book. And I brought my book. And I didn't copy it from you. You didn't copy it from me. Because the name of my book is for instance, okay? Don't exclude me to make it work. Because as a social worker, I'm all the time working with people out of school. It will create new concepts. That is to create the physical relationship which is going to change their life. It's important. The impact is accepting contributing to you and you contribute to me. Not as you thought you are accepting. You contribute to allow yourself
So in case you can't hear, he's saying that he gave me a book about reciprocity and the centrality of reciprocity.
I would like you to know the fellow feeling for the other's pleasure.
Reciprocity, he would like you to know, is fellow feeling for the other's pleasure. What I would like you to know is that play is how we learn reciprocity. And psychoanalysis and the psychotherapeutic encounter is one of play.
Any more questions? Ariela, you wanted to ask something?
I just wanted to comment that sometimes, I mean, it's beautiful to think that the repetition is to get to a certain feeling, good feeling probably. sometimes I think, mostly, repetition is a discussion.
Yes, so again, there's a whole lot. You must always please remember in meetings like this, one only gives the headlines, and there's so much that lies behind them. And it's very frustrating that there's so much that can't be said. But I will just allude to it. That I had one slide where I showed you the cortex, and it's got the declarative memory, and then there's the basal ganglia and other subcortical structures which are responsible for non-declarative memory. And why we have declarative memory is so that we can feel our way through problems again. It slows things down. It's working memory. It's thinking things through consciousness, which means feeling your way through the thing to come up with a new solution. But this is not the ideal of the mind. We tolerate not having answers. But what the ideal is we want to have solutions that we can go to which work. That doesn't mean it's easy, but that's the ideal. And then once we've done that, we automatize. And then it goes down to these basal ganglia type systems. Their whole modus operandi is repetition. That's the whole point of it, is I just do the same thing over and over and over again. The problem is, we don't only automatize good predictions, we also automatize bad ones, like smoking in mice.
Questions? Now we are moving to questions to the other presenter lecturers. Pardon? Yeah. Someone you want to debate. Yeah. You are debatable. Any questions to the lecturers? Yes, please.
Can anyone see or explain what may be the benefit of having a very small working memory? It seems like it's a problem we struggle with a lot. So why not add a bit of memory? That's the benefit of having such a small upgrade. I can tell you that the system that does not, forget the message, okay? The system that does not forget is incapable of interrupting and not changing words. So if you want to forget that, you want to have some memory that is structured. Forgetting fast in computer science is a mechanism to interrupt the change.
Why do you need to put it fast?
If you couldn't forget, you wouldn't change your mind.
It's one of my problems.
Yes, in Doctor. One of the memorials is fantastic. One of the memorials is a short story by Walker about the one who couldn't forget anything after some accident that took him the whole day to describe yesterday. Okay, so eventually he died. He died by detailing himself there.
The problem with points was also that it could not accept it.
Which is
Every detail was specific and individual.
the message of
More questions? Yes.
Two remarks and one question. First, I still opportunities work with grasping the idea of consciousness. Now it seems to more blur than before. Is it really reflection, hyper-reflection, awareness? I understand what you said. But since I believe that everything has not everything, but many things have a cognitive component in means of data processing. I'm not really sure now if conscience is what we speak about. We are talking about consciousness, especially in psychotherapy, when we really think about reflection and active reflection of oneself. So this stands to me to be explored more. the second question is, refer to what you said about the weak and the hard problem. I do believe that it is not totally solve the hard problem. Because that's what I think. Because that's the mind body. That's the mind. Don't exaggerate. The mind body. The heart. You solve the soft one. This is how not easy. Easy.
But the easy is easy just because they are easy, not easy in a methodological way.
Yes.
It's not easy, the problem of them is very difficult, but they are scientific problems. They are not easy.
So that's really the body, mind, model. And adding to that, I accept what you said about the 7 principles. Have been tremendously that even after the session, the next day I have another patient with the same thing. And all the change in the conceptualization, they helped a lot. But the only thing that remains for me unsolved is thing that which is not really understood by the 7 principles, and that's our need, quest for beauty, harmony, art, and so on, and which is a need. For some people it is a need. And it's not really play, it's not really, I don't know, how people are willing to do many efforts in order to get there. I don't know how to explain it.
Must I comment? So again, I will try to be brief. Always remember that if I'm trying to be brief, it means I'm leaving out a hell of a lot. So if you would give me more hours, you would be convinced. The question as to the shortness of short-term memory, for me, my starting point of answering this is to do with the fact that it's feeling. Consciousness is feeling. You can't, and feeling has a purpose. Feeling is for doing, as I was explaining. It's not like the qualia of exception. Feeling impels us to do something because it represents a need, a biological need which includes emotion. You need to do something. This is what feeling, you can't do 2 things at once, or you can't do too many things at once. So the feeling dominates consciousness now, then I'm trying to meet this need. You can't feel all your needs simultaneously and act on all of them simultaneously. So something has to be prioritized. Then there's feedback, and then there's a change. So this constant wiping out of what was there before has, in my view, everything to do with the fact that consciousness has to do with action, and that it has to do with feeling, and that you can't do too many things at once. There's a bottleneck in the discharge systems. This relates somehow to the question that you asked, the first one. But to do with the heart, you haven't yet. It was to do with the reflexive aspects of consciousness. Again, I only spoke about phenomenal consciousness. I only spoke about feeling. And that's because, as we were told by our 2 philosopher colleagues, the heart problem is a problem of phenomenal consciousness. That is also a necessary first step toward understanding reflective consciousness and access consciousness and higher order thoughts and all these sorts of things. I didn't speak about all of those things. So I'm not surprised that you hadn't seen where that fits in. If I was going to give another lecture now, I would tell you how I see those things, but obviously I don't have time to go into that. Then you said something about what was it about the different systems? Now I think you said something about the aesthetics, yes. So I spoke about my talk, actually, to the extent that I have spoken about the emotional systems, the affect systems, I spoke about the emotional ones. But there are many more affects than emotion. There are, like hunger is not an emotion, thirst is not an emotion, sleepiness is not an emotion. And then those are called, these are bodily needs, but they're felt as affects, and these I think are the most basic affects. Emotions are a higher order of affects, and I spoke mostly about those. Then there are sensory affects. like the pleasure in certain tastes, the pain in certain sensations, the disgust in certain smells, and so on. Surprise is a sensory affect. So what the bridge to what you're talking about is sensory affects when you speak about aesthetics and beauty and whatnot. It's not, we make a mistake if we think that the 7 emotional needs are the sum total of our needs, and the 7 emotional affects are the sum total of our affects, not at all. But that's just the bridge. Sensory affects is the bridge to what you're talking about. I say that because it's not by any means the whole story, because it goes to your question about reflective consciousness, is that affects is the raw materials of consciousness, which then get elaborated in extremely complex ways in cognition. And all of these hybrid forms, like things like, even simpler than what you're talking about, things like guilt and envy and shame, these are not basic emotions. They're ubiquitous, but they're hybrids. They are resultants of interacting affective and cognitive processes. And these complex aesthetic experiences you're talking about are not basic emotions. That doesn't mean they don't exist. And that speaks also to the question of complexity. Because you reduce things to their elements doesn't mean that you don't know that they have to be put back together.
I think you're confusing about what consciousness is not your fault, I would say, just a misfortunate term.
Can you speak slowly?
Yes, just saying that the term consciousnness is misfortunate because it simply covers various things. It has to do with the latter proof of the word consciousness. And conscious, sometimes we use the term awareness. Yes, and they are very different. So it's just different phenomena.
Is affect anything that moves us to act.
So the question is, does affect move us to act? And to me, this is the main difference between affective qualia and extraceptive qualia. Is precisely that they have people who say that feeling has no place in nature, no place in biology, no place in the causal matrix of the universe. I ask them to explain suicide. Feelings have very definite effects. They make us do things.
I'm pushing a little bit. Anything that moves us to act is an affect. That's it.
Ideology.
Sorry?
Ideology.
So you're asking me, it's everything that moves us to act an affect? So that depends. I'm sorry, I'm going to answer one more question, then other people must be asked questions. It mustn't just be me. The Freudian term is drive. And I am of the view that drives are conscious things. You feel them. That when you don't feel your needs, you behave differently than when you do feel your needs. I think that feeling adds something, and this compels us to act voluntarily. Then there are all sorts of other things we also do, which are done automatically. So not everything we do is the result of current feeling, by no means. There's a hell of a lot that we do, which is either based on innate predictions, in other words, instinctive reflexes, or on conditioned instincts and reflexes, which is everything we've learned from experience. Once it has become non-declarative, once it's not in our consciousness, it happens automatically. So there's lots that we do, which is the result of past affects, and even things we're born with which have nothing to do with our own individual experience.
Jan wants to ask you something.
There's one remark on Hebrew affect is ta'alul. Same rule like action. Ta'alul. Effect.
Emotion is about notion.
אנשים שעוד לא דיברו, בבקשה.
So I want to ask you that we started to talk about yesterday. So there are other approaches to affect neuroscience to emotions that speak about constructed, social constructed emotions, and that's a different approach. And
And that's an approach that says not like a system that works in a specific brain areas, but actually something that grows through interactions and also has to do with how it studies, right? So I want your opinion, and I want how you integrate these different approaches. And approaches that come from the lab that I come from that what actually propagates and the intensity of emotion has to do with cohesion between the functional connected areas of the brain and not systems of emotion. So I'm struggling with a way to integrate dynamics in brain reaction and something that's evolutionary emotions.
So does anyone else want to comment on that question?
It's fine, you are doing fine.
Maybe, yeah, exactly. We are almost on time.
We all fell from
You all felt like so, you see.
Yeah.
This is why we checked it. Who's going to fall? Who's going to stay?
So
We're going to stay with us.
if no one else wants to answer, I'll say very, very, very briefly that I am not a fundamentalist despite apparent appearances. I think that there are basic emotions of an evolutionarily, that come with the phenotype. And there is so much evidence that there are certain affects which you can stimulate with exactly the same electrode in exactly the same place. Not only in every human being will you get the same affect, but in every mammal you will get the same affect. The evidence is overwhelming, but that is not the sum total of affectivity. There are also affects which are socially constructed, and in a way what I was saying points to this thing, that there are basic, there's the feeling of hunger. It's not socially constructed, but there's the feeling of needing to urinate. It's not socially, there's pain. It's not socially, it's orgasms. It's not socially constructed. They feel like that, and there's a certain kind of behavior, a certain part of the brain, etc., that gives rise to these feelings. Then there are feelings which are very different from one culture to another, very different from one individual to another. And of course, this is the socially constructed part of it, because the raw, basic affects are not. They interact with each other, they interact with cognition, they interact with very different.
It's hard to achieve because the methodology that you're trying to use, which is a product of our thinking, is scientific, and the scientific methodology is not adequate in trying to reach a third realm.
Actually, this is the definition of the hard problem.
לא שמענו.
This is the definition of the hard problem according to Charles' paper. This is the definition.
I'd like to ask you, I'd like to ask you, I thought your talk, like everyone's talk, was really interesting and challenging for me to understand, I must say. But you're talking about the integration and the problematics of the integration. And while you sort of raised a question about the neuropsychoanalysis, you yourself would love to see James and Freud together. And I'm wondering about this country here. And is there something about Israel, I'm a clinical psychologist, and it's so psychoanalytically oriented where it's not in the rest of the world. I mean, I don't know about South Africa, I haven't met psychologists in South Africa, but my friends from Europe and from Canada and from the United States are far from where I'm, and I'm wondering about this connection here in this country, and if you have any thoughts about that.
It's challenging, in many ways in forming connections between people who speak different languages. I don't know enough about how solid or deeply rooted psychoanalysis is in Israel. I'm a physiologist, okay? I came to look at these things just because I felt being in the hospital as a physician for a while and in the psychiatry department, that there is an alienation between two cultures. The overly biological culture on the one hand, and the overly protective and attacking or whatever, the dynamical psychology culture. And it is okay to dialogue between two very different cultures, but there are rules that should govern a respectful dialogue, and this is, I think, where we miss. I don't know how unique it is to Israel. We're not good in dialogue in general. I don't know how unique it is to Israel. I mean, every scientist should go through a therapy, I think. This is a start. Like we should all speak Arabic as a start. Okay.
Thank you very much. Mark is going to go with his concluding remark.
According to the program, that's the end of the conference. Okay. So I would like to say, first of all, that, and I'm not being, I'm not schmoozing you if I say this. I really have enjoyed this conference enormously. When I looked at the program, I was quite nervous because it looked like a hodgepodge of things, you know, but it really was the most fabulous hodgepodge. It was really very brave. I don't know if it was accidental or if it was brilliant, but it was a very brave combination of really very high-level talks. You see, it's quite hard to have high-level analytical philosophy in the same place as psychoanalysis, in the same place as physiology and neuroscience, and you know, and clinical cases and so on. It's really brave to do it, and I think it worked brilliantly. I think, speaking of Israel, there is, of course, something especially brilliant about Jews, not just Israelis. So I always love it here because I actually think I should be Jewish. My children are Jewish, but I'm not. I'm trying my best to improve biologically doing my duty. But it's really fantastic being here, fantastic being at this conference. Always I love it here. And I think there's something really special about the intellectual climate. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say is that amongst those presentations, there were some challenging ones toward me. And I want to make one or two remarks about that. And then I'll make one last closing sentence about the hard problem. You know, I have a friend, in fact, he's my partner in the wine enterprise. And his grandmother was the first female MP in Britain. Her name was Nancy Astor. And as you can imagine, all the males in this very conservative institution called the Houses of Parliament in Britain were not very happy to have a woman coming in. And they attacked her like anything, especially Churchill, attacked her terribly. And in the newspapers, there were always the most terrible things said about her. And she said something which I have tried to hold on to, and it came back to me while I was sitting here in your conference. She said, in relation to all of these things said about her in the newspaper, she said, I don't care what they say about me in the newspapers, as long as it's not true. And, you know, why that came back to me is because I find it really puzzling to be represented as a reductionist, materialist, brain in a vat kind of guy. Because, I mean, my own sense of myself bears no resemblance to this whatsoever. I started out in the neurosciences. I was so frustrated by the lack of subjectivity, by the lack of a realization that this information processing shit that I was being taught, you know, is just not even nearly an adequate account of the life of the mind and the organ of the mind. And the most interesting thing about the brain is that it feels like something to be a brain. That's what distinguishes it from everything else in physiology and in anatomy and in biology. And that's the part that's most interesting about it. That's why I trained in psychoanalysis. And my neuroscientific colleagues thought I was off my head. You know, what do you do? It's like an astronomer training in astrology. It didn't win me any friends. I was in the Department of Neurosurgery at the Royal London Hospital by day, and by night I was at the Institute of Psychoanalysis. To then come back to the psychoanalytic, you are my salvation, out of reductionist, materialist, brain in a vat neuroscience, and then it's like, So as I say, I don't care what they say about me as long as it's not true. But also if you try to shake things up because you believe there's something wrong, you must expect criticism. You mustn't, otherwise you must not say anything. You know, if you want everyone to love you and agree with you, then go along with the crowd. The pleasure in the exploration of the interaction between these fields, for me, has just been an enormous reward. And if you try and stop me from doing it. The hard problem, and then I will end. It's to Yochai. Where is he?
Eyes over there with his hand.
Yeah.
Oh, there you've changed appearance. Yeah. So I don't know if you know David Chalmers.
Yeah, I know him.
So
I met him in the bedroom, in
say-
the toilet.
The bed?
I met him twice in the toilet.
So you know him biblically. There are many people who revere the heart problem and who say it is a metaphysical problem and not open to solution, are surprised they haven't even read the paper. Because if you read that paper, first of all you find that Chalmers is a dual aspect monist. Secondly, that he thinks that both brain and consciousness can be reduced to information. This is very, and thirdly, he believes, therefore, by definition, but he actually says so explicitly, that it is not an insoluble problem. Therefore, he invites us to try to solve this problem. And I do not believe that I personally have solved it, and it's not false modesty. I really can see the gap between where I am and where we have to go to. But I do believe that I've given an important clue. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for staying until the
lecturer.
Wait. For being brave to join us to this venture we are doing. I want to thank the committee members. Without them, we would never do that. They were traveling all around Tel Aviv and back and everywhere. And I would like to thank the lecturer, especially you that you stayed with me. And you highly well. And many thanks. I don't think I have enough words to say how much I thank you, and I think the whole group, so please.
I want to thank Irit